Welcome, listeners. Lore Master here. Today we are going to be talking about the Horus Heresy. For the next 100 episodes of this podcast, I will be going book by book through the Horus Heresy, also tackling the, maybe so to speak, smaller books that a lot of people don't want to waste an Audible credit on or don't have the $12 to spare to buy these small novellas, basically, that go over super important parts of the Horus Heresy. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, this is a 40K podcast. Why are we talking about the Horus Heresy? This is where I'm going to start. Mostly because the Horus Heresy is my favorite book series of all time. And I'm the one doing the podcast, so this is where we're starting. Just kidding. But it is my favorite book series of all time. The Horus Heresy gives a really unique view of why 40K Universe is the way it is today. There are certain massive events that happen post-Horus Heresy that shape the Imperium to be where it is in the current lore with 10th edition 40K and Hive Fleet Leviathan's invasions. But to truly understand why the Imperium is the way it is, who the Primarchs are, why Guilliman and now the Dark Angels Primarch the Lion are doing what they're doing, you have to understand the nuances and important plot points of the Horus Heresy. Now, I'll tell you this podcast obviously is meant to save time. If you don't have time to read the books, I'm hoping this will be the second best option for you to get the info you need to understand the lore behind these books. But, as I'd also say, these are my favorite book series. Please, if you have the time, you really should take the time to listen to them so that you can listen or read, I suppose. It can be Audible. I have them in hard copy. I love to read hard copy books, but listen to them on Audible, read them, find PDFs or MP3 files online. These books are amazing, and the people that narrate them are awesome if you're listening to an audio file, and the people that wrote them did a fantastic job, and there really isn't one that I don't like. So, like I said, we're going to be diving into the Horus Heresy, understanding what's going on. So, of course, the first book of the Horus Heresy, though that is under some debate, as there are a lot of short stories that lead up to the first book, and we'll be tackling those after we finish the first three books of the Horus Heresy. But the first book that we'll be talking about was Horus Rising. Horus Rising is an absolute magnificent piece of work that, was written by, I have the omnibus here, so I'm trying to find it out really quick. Written by Dan Abnett, the god of Black Library. Dan Abnett is awesome. He's written a lot of really great books. Half of my shelf I feel like is his, but he did a very good job. The first three books, of course, are Horus Rising, False Gods, Galaxy in Flames. False Gods is written by Graham McNeil, and Galaxy of Flames is written by Ben Counter. But today, like I said, we're going to be talking about Horus Heresy, Horus Heresy, yes, of course, but Horus Rising, and really getting into the importance of that book, and getting you all the main points, so that you can talk to anybody and know what's going on in those books. Like I said, we're going to be going through the whole thing, so sit back, and we're going to start off and get going. So, let's get rolling. All right. Horus Rising. Horus Rising, almost everyone has read this book. And always everyone is a little shocked when the first sentence they read of the book is, I was there. I was there the day Horus slew the Emperor. And of course everyone immediately thinks, well, the Emperor wasn't killed by Horus. He was just wounded. But that's not what the character of the book, Garvale Loken, is talking about. But what he's talking about is the very opening chapters of the book, where we see the fleet of the War Master Horus Lupercal of the Luna Wolves basically coming to a world during the Great Crusade and trying to enforce imperial compliance upon them. To understand kind of what's going on here, I'll give you a little bit of background info. So, of course, the Emperor of Mankind creates the Space Marine. Well, creates Thunder Warriors, unifies Terra, creates the Space Marines. They launch a crusade into the galaxy to find his lost sons. He made 20 Primarchs, 2 of which we don't know anything about. Well, very little. There is some speculation, but that's for another podcast episode. But basically, he loses all these guys and he sends them off into the stars, all the Primarchs. One thing that's important to note is that during the Great Crusade, these Primarchs would be found piecemeal, bit by bit by bit, in different circumstances on different worlds. Some of these Primarchs would have had amazing upbringings with basic fathers that would have taken care of them on these worlds and shown them what it is to grow into adulthood, which they would do rapidly and quickly come to conquer their systems. Other Primarchs would be much less lucky. Konrad Curze, of course, Angron the World Eaters, these would be situations of that. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's totally fine. We will get into that as we go through the books, because luckily all this lore is explained. I've just read them all a couple times, so I'm able to jump back a little bit and talk about it. So, as the Great Crusade goes throughout the galaxy, mankind is being reintroduced into the Imperium Man as it grows. Large fleets of ships filled with these super heroes, basically, which are Space Marines, genetically modified super warriors, go from star system to star system, finding lost colonies of man from the time when we had colonized the stars. A lot of times these colonies are happy to be found, and they come back into the fold of the Imperium, accept Imperial law, accept a new governor, and everything is moved on. They accept the Imperial truth. Many other times, these places are quite happy as they are and don't want to be ruled. So therefore, they tell the fleets that are coming to meet them, we're not going to submit to you. And then that's where, either through negotiation or through military might, these planets are forced to capitulate by the forces that are coming to them. Now, a big part of understanding why the Imperium is doing what it's doing is, of course, to reunite humanity. That's the Emperor's goal, or at least what he says it is, to the Emperor's goal. And then also to basically spread the light of the Imperial truth. The Imperial truth, or the cult of the Imperial truth, is a movement that's been set up by the Emperor, which is the eradication of all religion and beliefs. He believes that those things have held humanity back in the past and has always caused our downfall. So in his mind, he thinks that destroying humanity's religions and beliefs through the belief of science and that everything can be explained, which is the Imperial truth, is how humanity will be able to retake the stars and grow to be the greatest empire of all time. So that's a really big part of this. Now, the Crusade fleets, of course, are Adeptus Astartes, but there's also human elements. The legions themselves are from anywhere from 70,000 to the smallest legions to 160,000 Space Marines strong. And a Space Marine, like I said, is a massive genetically modified super warrior. So these are not forces to be lightly reckoned with. Alongside these fleets come the Remembrancer Corps, and these are really important players all throughout the Horus Heresy, as the Remembrancers are basically scholars, artists, musicians from Terra, Earth, or the surrounding areas that are attached, large contingents of them are attached to these Crusade fleets to record the glory of the Great Crusade. They draw pictures, they write poems, they write books, they talk, they get interviews, they take pictures. It's their job to ensure that all this is not lost again. So let's get into it. So like again I said, the book starts with a very chilling statement. I was there the day that Horus slew the Emperor. We all know Horus and the Emperor fight, and one of them dies above Terra during the Siege of Terra, during the Horus Heresy, because we all know Horus falls to chaos. At least if you've done if you've clicked on a 10-minute, 40k lore explained video, they run over that very briefly. And that's the importance of these three books. These three books show the fall of Horus, and through the eyes of those that are close to him. So that's what makes these three books so important and so beloved to those that enjoy the Horus Heresy lore. So let's get started here. So the Luna Wolf Crusade fleet, they come above the planet of I guess it's unnamed. They come above the planet unnamed, and basically they're here to subject it to the Imperial truth. As they come above the planet, they're met by Vox messages that say that basically the Emperor of Mankind is telling them to make themselves known and what their purposes are and all that stuff. Horus is like, that's not the Emperor of Mankind. The Emperor of Mankind is back on Terra. So who is this person? And so he talks to the planetary governors and basically discovers that there is someone who is calling himself the Emperor and rules this little star system. And basically, in a lot of ways, it's a lot like what Terra is back in the Sol system. So Horus is like, well, this is crazy. let's negotiate and talk and see what can be done, see if we can bring you into our empire. So he sends a delegation. He sends his favorite son, Hastur Sejanus, an example of what a Space Marine should be. He sends him along with his Glory Squad. The Glory Squad are all these amazing warriors who also aren't just warriors. These Space Marines are also they're good at diplomacy. They're more human. They can talk with, they're literally like gods among men. So he sends them down to the planet for this agreed upon truce discussion. As they're flying down to the planet planet batteries open up, blowing up the starship, killing Hastur Sejanus, much to Horus's horror, as well as the whole Glory Squad. Only one would survive, Malagurus, and he would be horrifically brutalized by the wreck and would never be able to serve in full capacity again. This is a very interesting part of this book. The first paragraphs, you kind of are basically getting the tale through that of a listener to a Space Marine telling this story. In 40K, one of the big things that we know is that Space Marines are tools. They are weapons. They have lost their humanity to a degree. Obviously, there's a lot of situations in books and in the codex and stuff where we hear about Space Marines not doing that, but for the most part, Space Marines are closed off weapons that people don't know about in the year 40,000. Now in the year 30,000, Space Marines are a lot more. And that's the importance of these books. These books are to show us that Space Marines were not just supposed to be tools, that they were supposed to do more. Hastur Sejanus is an amazing example of this, as he was known as the diplomat. He is a diplomat. But so basically we get to see this story as it goes, and it's being told, so we get to see it. We get to see that there's a captain of the Luna Wolves named Tarek Torkadin, and he sent one of these remembrancers that I've talked about before, Mercedes Olaton, and she's been sent to talk to the 10th Company Captain, Loken, Garviel Loken, who will retell this story for her, as he was the one that basically saw it all from the beginning to the end, the compliance of this world. And so she's sent down to talk to him, and they have a good discussion. In the book, now obviously I can't convey this all within under an hour, but in the book there's so many nuances of her seeing his humanity, and him recognizing her humanity, and them realizing that they're both very beautiful things in that degree, the humanity of mankind. And we get to see that. We get to see that even though Loken, this massive genetically modified super warrior, he still is a human, and he has empathy, and he's able to tell this story and think about others and show remorse for those that fall in the battle. But anyway, we come back to the compliance of the planet. Horus unleashes the sons of Horus, I slipped up. The Luna Wolves, they're not the sons of Horus yet, unleashes the Luna Wolves onto the planet. They come down to the planet, they storm the bulwarks. Legion Unleashed is like a tidal wave that nothing can stand against. No matter how good of a soldier you are, no matter how well trained you are, these warriors come down, they smash down through drop pods, through landing craft, just swarming the field with massive gen-enhanced bodies, firing bolt guns, which are these that shoot rocket-propelled shells that explode on impact, which just turn a human into red paste. Nothing can stand against them. And so throughout the course of the battle, we get to see how Loken commands his command squad as they go and fight through the city to reach the capital where the Emperor of Mankind, so-called, the false one, is. They fight their way through all kinds of situations until they reach the top, where they have to fight the elite guard called the Invisibles of the Emperor of Mankind. They see him sitting on a massive golden throne, which is, again, a little ironic considering where the Emperor sits now in the current lore. But here you see this group of Invisibles. They're these warriors that are superly high trained. They've been genetically modified a little bit, but they wear suits that make them invisible. So Loken and his guard have to fight them. They defeat them. And Loken comes face to face with this old man Emperor, who looks nothing like the Emperor of Mankind. He looks old, crispy. He's by no means anything compared to the Emperor as any of these guys know, as I've seen him at the Triumph of Ulanor and stuff like that. But the Emperor of Mankind, wishes to speak with the commander of the invasion. So, aka, he wants to talk to the man himself, Horus Lupercal. Horus agrees, and he starts coming down, and that's when Loken realizes it's a trap. Basically, the Golden Throne itself is a weapon, and as Horus comes into the room, it basically creates like a whirlwind-like bomb, which just like throws everyone around, and it seems like it's super scary, but Horus, as Loken describes him, is like a god as he stands and looks down at this old frail man, and he ends all of it with a single bolt shell from his gauntlet, which will kill the false Emperor of Mankind. So that's why Loken would say, "I was there the day that Horus slew the Emperor." This is the first look that we get at Horus, because he's described, but we never see him in person. He's just a massive, godlike warrior of a man, exudes nobility, strength, honor, loyalty. And when he shoots that false emperor, he says, "So I will deal with all tyrants and deceivers." And then he helps Loken up. And in the story, we hear Loken talk about how he smiles at him, and then Loken, of course, calls him the War Master, and he says, "There's no need to be so formal." And that's really why this is our first glimpse at the charisma of Horus Lupercal. Horus Lupercal is a charismatic god. He is able to make everyone like him, for the most part. Of course, there's people that, well, that's not true. I think even when we go into later books and we read, we see that the other Primarchs who maybe were frustrated that they were not made War Master like Horus was elected to by the Emperor, they still respect him. Everyone respected Horus, and everyone, for the most part, liked him. So that's a very interesting part of that. So with the end of the tale, Mercedes Olaton asked Loken if there was any other way that they could have potentially left this world alone, uncompliant. Which Loken says, "No, ask a better question. This is it. This is human finality. We are finality. The Imperium is humans either must join us or they will be destroyed and forced to join us." Another really awesome part about these books is we get a lot of flashback to important moments that led to these books. Like, we get to hear basically about flashbacks to the Triumph of Ulanor, which was when the Emperor won this last great battle against orcs, and then he retired from the Great Crusade, electing Horus Lupercal as War Master over all of his brothers, which caused some anger among the brothers, some of them feeling like it should have been them. But that being said, we get to kind of see that there's a reason why he was chosen War Master, and you'll get to see that throughout this book. But yeah, another really great part about Horus Rising, it gives us a really unique glimpse into the lives of mortals. It's in this next chapter that we read about Ignis Carcassy and Euphrates Keeler. Both of them end up meeting with the Remembrancer that talked to Loken, Mercedes Olaton, in the Remembrancer lounge on the ship. This is where Remembrancers say that 10 times fast, come to meet and swap stories and talk about what's going on. They speak about Loken, and Mercedes Olaton is not impressed after her conversation with him. She feels that he's just like he's just a cruel person, that he would not seek to find another way than destroying a human race and everything like that. Which then, of course, Ignis Carcassy is like, "Are you kidding me? I've been trying to get an audience with him for months. It's been impossible." So and she's kind of taken aback because Loken is the one that is so highly thought of and sought after by many of these Remembrancers, whereas she herself would rather talk to Tarik Torgadan, the captain that sent her to go talk to Loken, and she will of course have time to do that. We jump back now and we find Garviel Loken in the training cages with members of his squad. This is a part of the ship where Astartes, the Space Marines, Adeptus Astartes, come to train in their blade work and keep honing their skills, even if they didn't train, they would still be the most deadly weapons in the galaxy. And here is where Loken is approached by Tarik Torgadan. This is our first real time seeing Tarik. And Tarik is someone that I hope during the course of this next 3 books I can convey to you what an awesome character Tarik Torgadan is. He has boisterous personality that you just immediately fall in love with. He laughs and tells jokes and is always poking fun at his brothers, the other Space Marines, and this is like something that's super uncharacteristic in 40k lore, so it's a little shocking when the first time you read this book and you're like, whoa, Space Marine telling jokes, Space Marines making fun of each other, and like Tarek is definitely that. But the one thing is, though he's always cracking jokes and he's kind of a joker, a clown, he radiates loyalty and brotherhood. Tarek Torgadon is someone that would die for his brothers. So, of course, Loken and him duel in the training cages as they hone their skills. But while they're fighting, because a lot of this is just muscle memory for them, they have a conversation. Tarek tells Loken that if he'll accept the honor, he was voted to become Hoster Sejanus, the one who was shot down in his ship, replacement on the Mournival. The Mournival is a council of 4 that privately advises the War Master, Horus. It's an unofficial body, so it basically doesn't have any sort of rank or purpose, but the 4 individuals are supposed to be able to speak together without fear of repercussion, be able to share honest opinions with the War Master, and be like his small council. And Loken is taken aback, absolutely flabbergasted that he would be the one that would be chosen for this role. But he does accept it and basically tells Tarek that he would be honored. After this conversation with Tarek Torgadon, he goes down to the bowels of the ship to talk to another very important Imperial character in Garviel Loken's tale, Kyril Sinderman. Kyril Sinderman is known by the Emperor himself. He is a super well-known Imperial historian, an orator, that's what they're called. They give speeches, they're writers, they chronicle. He's like a very, very important historian, also sort of philosopher, as he's read so much of humankind's history. Loken enjoys talking with him because Loken also enjoys reading old texts and books about mankind's history. He and Loken have a super long conversation discussing Loken's elevation to the Mournival. To which Kyril Sinderman is like, this is great. I highly approve of this decision. And he knows that, and he tells Loken, Horus has had his eye on you, and he even brings up that the other Primarch of the Imperial Fist, Rogel Dorn, also had singled Loken out, due to the fact that he's such a straightforward, great individual. They have a great discussion about how Space Marines themselves aren't necessarily always used to destroy, but they are a necessary part of when it needs to happen. And a big part of that is Garviel Loken brings up the point that the Adeptus Astartes are a necessary evil, to which Kyril Sinderman responds, no, they are a necessary instrument. And this is a really important thing to realize, because eventually in 40k, Space Marines would just become instruments in defending the Imperium. They wouldn't have this sort of conversation between a historian and a Space Marine in most chapters wouldn't happen in the year 40,000, and in the time past that. It shows that there's so much humanity that was lost during the course of the Horus Heresy and the events that followed. But at the same time, we also get to see how much there was, Next, as Loken finishes conversation, he is summoned and he goes down to the surface of the planet to be inducted into the Mournival by his 3 brothers of the Mournival, Ezekiel Abaddon, Horus Aximand, aka Little Horus, and Tarek Torgadon, and of course Horus Lupercal is there as well. He is briefly. The beautiful ceremony of rituals and ancient tradition, Chthonian tradition, take place, and then we really get to see, as this ceremony happens, that this is a bond of brotherhood. This isn't basically just like promotion. Like, by joining this sacred covenant with these 3 individuals, Loken is bearing his soul as a brother to them in a bond of loyalty that can never be broken and will always be protected. And that's what makes the Mournival so awesome. And I can't read too much, but I'm going to read a little bit out of this for you. But they speak of all that, like, Loken has to pledge his service to Luna Wolves, to the commander, to the emperor, to uphold the imperial truth, to stand firm against all enemies and in war. And then they say the Luna Wolves saying, and, kill for the living and kill for the dead. And as the moon lights us, will you be a true brother to your brother Astares? I will, no matter what the cost, no matter what the cost. And this is set in darkness, and then basically Torek Terganen pulls a vapor flare from his belt and fires it off, enlightening the little clearing in the pool where they're standing. And Loken is now one of them, one of this super important brotherhood, this brotherhood that cannot be broken. And it's a really awesome part. After the induction of him into the Mournival, we see the Mournival step into the first war council that we get to see in person of Horus Lupercal, where he gives governorship of the world that they just subjected. And we get to see really how charismatic he is. We also get to meet Malagurst, the Twisted. He's now recovered from his injuries and now advises the War Master. Malagurst is, of course, very... So where the Astartes protect Horus in physical form, Malagurst protects him with intrigue and politics. Malagurst is the Game of Thrones Littlefinger of Horus Lupercal's court. When they're going forward, Loken, throughout the War Council, they discuss the plans of what they should do. They discuss the rebel forces that are still fighting on the world. The world hasn't been completely complianced. And Loken chips in on the planning by saying that they should just deploy and finish it off so they can move on to the next step of the war. After this, he's congratulated by everyone around him of his brothers, saying that was great advice, good job. Horus Lupercal agrees, and they're gonna go to war. Loken is given some very interesting advice during this time, basically by Horus Aximand, who says, you did really well in there, all that stuff. Kirill Sinderman also brings up very interesting points, saying that the War Master can't always look like a warmonger, so he wanted Loken to say that they should go to war, which is where, again, we kind of get to see Horus's political acumen. He's here to... he's got an agenda, just like everyone else. We see that Horus is very much a political animal, which is why he was made War Master over the other brothers. Horus is charismatic, everyone loves him, he's a brilliant tactical genius and leader of soldiers, but he also understands politics, and he also understands the importance of a show. And this is kind of a great example of this. During this time, after the meeting, they do some more stuff on the ship, and then the Imperial Fist convoy meets up with them, and we get to meet the Primarch Rogal Dorn and his first captain Sigismund for the first time. We get to see again kind of that, like, though these are completely different individuals from different legions with different customs, we get to see Torek Terganen kind of banter with Sigismund, and basically them be able to have brotherly conversation, even though they barely ever see each other, but you can tell that the loyalty and the like-minded purpose makes all of these guys really enjoy each other's company to a degree. And there's an instance in this where Torek Terganen says, I'm gonna smack Sigismund down, to which Dorn appears from behind and says, does Sigismund need a good smacking, kind of as a joke. And of course, we see a really interesting moment where Dorn takes Garviel Loken aside, which of course he tells him that he had his eye on him and was very happy that he was chosen and elevated, which Loken asks why, and he says because Horus needs an honest voice. This is an interesting part of this because so far it's been very much this Mournival, these four brothers, always, it just seems like a happy gathering, but Dorn's kind of illustrates here that maybe Horus isn't getting the truth all of the time. because Ezekiel Abaddon, and Horus Aximand are so fiercely loyal to the Primarch. Would they naysay him? Probably not. And Tarek Torgadon is a jokester, and he's there to liven the mood. And he's also a very loyal, straightforward person, but he wouldn't necessarily be that person either to say his mind no matter what the consequence, like Loken would be. Garviel Loken is that person, and Dorn brings that up. So then from that point onward, we move forward to the actual crushing of the insurgents, which Garviel spoke out for during the council. The insurgents had retreated to a place called the Whisperhead Mountains. So Loken takes part in this assault with the 10th. And they bring Remembrancers with them for the first time. This is the first time Remembrancers have been allowed to come on a combat mission. But it's basically because that the Remembrancers have been complaining that they haven't been able to see everything. They just get to see the aftermath of what happens. They don't actually get to see what's going on in person. They relieve the Imperial forces there. There's Imperial army that have been fighting the insurgents for the last couple weeks, and Loken talks to the head of the forces, and who says that he feels the place is haunted, and he's very happy to get out of there. This is kind of a weird interaction for Loken, as something being haunted allies to the supernatural, which of course the Imperial truth doesn't allow. But they flush it and they move on. So Loken takes part of the assault. The Remembrancers are brought with them. And as they push into the Whisperheads to go to engage these rebels, they start to begin to hear whispers over the Vox. And this is the first instance that we get to see of. I mean, honestly, this whole chapters is very creepy, because like no one really knows what's going on, and what's being said is super creepy. So basically we can kind of hear Samus began his whirring again. Samus. That's the only name you'll hear. Samus. It means the end and the death. Samus. I am Samus. Samus all around you. Samus is the man beside you. Samus will gnaw upon your bones. Look out. Samus is here. And throughout this attack on the Whisperheads, this is constantly going on in the Vox channel. All the people are hearing it. People who have their Voxes turned off are hearing it. And it's super bizarre. And it's super unsettling. So this is also an example, this whole story section is also an example of what the Remembrancers getting to see Space Marines do what they're meant to do, which is kill people. Space Marines are weapons of war created to absolutely destroy enemies. And when basically they're horrified by the slaughter that they see. Now, they're not like right on the front lines, but the aftermath is just slaughter. There's no dead Space Marines. There's some wounded, but for the most part, they're just walking through these rebel defenses that the army has been unable to break for weeks, and are just walking through them as if they weren't there, like it was a shallow stream they're crossing. As the Astartes eventually finally wipe out the last resistance, as they get to the top of the mountains, they find a place where humans have been leaving offerings, kind of like as a spiritual site, leaving offerings for something. They don't know what. This is when the squad that Loken's with, he's with his command squad that he's basically selected in the leading of the assault, but he's also with the sergeant of another sort of like shock attack squad named Xavier Jubal. And this is during their finding of the ritual site, and then the conversations they have over the next couple pages. Xavier Jubal starts acting really weird, saying all this weird stuff, shaking his head. And basically it's pretty clear to see that whoever this voice, this Samus that's carrying over the Vox, has started to affect him. And then he eventually like takes his helmet off, and you can see he's just like crazy in the eyes, and he kills Loken's command squad sergeant with a just shot to the head, and then immediately starts shooting men. It's an absolute shock. Space Marines never thought that they would have to kill each other. Of course, as we go through the future books, you'll get to see there were times it's happened, but especially the Luna Wolves never had to do that. And it's just like the hesitation. So as Xavier Jubal is gunning down these warriors, they don't even draw their guns because they don't want to kill him. They're like, this is so abhorrent to what we are. And basically, Loken tries to subdue him. Him and his men clamp their bolters and try to hand grapple him down, but they can't. Either they're killed by Jubal's bare hands, or thrown and wounded by his super strength. And Loken is finally forced to drive a knife into his heart, killing him. He immediately orders that Nero Vipus, who is someone who's very close to Loken, to come and look at the mortally wounded Jubal, who's dead now at this point, and to bring the Irritor Cinderman to witness what had just happened, because this is nuts. This had never happened in at least Luna Wolf's history of Astartes killing Astartes. Of course, like I said, we know there are other situations of that happening, where basically we have active war between Primarchs and their legions in a few instances. But for the Luna Wolves, again, like I said, this has never happened before. Loken relates all that he can to Cinderman, and Kirill Cinderman is like in absolute dumbfounded disbelief. And after a long conversation, Cinderman feels that the only way to explain this is a flaw in Jubal's gene code. But it's at this moment, when Cinderman passes his judgment, that the dead and tied up Jubal head snaps around, and he meets Cinderman's gaze, and it's like, "Look out, Samus is here," which is like hella creepy. This is this dude that's been like stabbed, and all of a sudden he flips up, and he escapes, and his body contorts, and he just turns into this like crazy demonic flesh monster, and he runs away with Loken and Nero Vipus in pursuit, and he runs into the party of Remembrancers, killing multiple of them, and is going to kill Euphrates Keeler, one of the Remembrancers, who's talking with Mercedes Olaton in the first couple chapters. But Loken and Vipus stop right before she's about to get bit in half by the monster, and they kill Jubal again with over 90 bolt rounds. It takes that much to bring him down. And basically, after that, since everyone else died, it's really just Vipus, Loken, Cinderman, and this Euphrates Keeler that even know about what happened during this moment. Then comes probably the most important part of the Horus Heresy, of Horus Rising, but also one of the Horus Heresy books. We get to see what happens when someone see something they're not, I guess, not supposed to, or what. But basically, Abaddon approaches Loken, is Ezekiel Abaddon, and they have a conversation where Abaddon pretty much just keeps telling Loken, "You did a good job. You led the assault. You wiped out the rebels. Things happen. Sometimes things we can't explain. Don't worry about it." You know, he doesn't want Loken to feel guilty, and this seems pretty innocent. And then Horus Lupercal comes to see him as well. And he asks Loken what he saw, and Loken retells the story and then goes and calls Jubal a demon, to which Horus says, "No, that's not what you saw." He's like, "It's what your brain is tricking you into saying you saw. What you saw was a Desian of the warp." Because, of course, the Imperium has been using warp to travel through ships, and the warp is just as dangerous during the Great Crusade as it is during later 40k. So there are demons inside the warp that can take over ships and destroy them and kill people, and horrible things can happen. But basically what the Imperium is saying is to accept demons would be to say the Imperial truth is a lie, that gods and things like that don't exist. So Horus basically explains to Loken that these are just Xenos. These are a different type of Xenos from a different reality, and they're here causing problems, and it's very rare this will happen. You'll probably never see it again. But basically, what you see here is even more proof that the Imperial truth is true. But we best not tell or talk to anybody about it. And he said he already talks with Cinderman and says the same thing, and they can't find Euphrates Keeler. So that's a really interesting part of this, is this scene, and it's not necessarily a cover-up, but it's a scene where we see Horus very much being like, demons aren't real, you need to calm down, don't worry about this. Next, we have a bit of a time jump, and this time when we get brought back into the book, we are no longer following Loken with the Sons of Horus, but we are following Saul Tarvitz, a captain of the Emperor's Children. We find him on a hostile world, kind of rebuilding his squad from a bunch of scattered survivors, as they are being attacked by these crazy, scary monsters. Basically, where they are is a planet designated murder in the systems of the Imperium records, and the Emperor's Children received a call for reinforcements from a couple companies of Blood Angels who had been deployed to this planet as to take it over for the Imperium, and they disappeared. And so the Emperor's Children make their way down to basically find out what's going on. We don't really know all the details of it right now, but basically they were fed company by company into this world, trying to establish and find where the Blood Angels are, because this planet Murder has these crazy storms that rage around the atmosphere, atmospheric storms, and there's no way to get Vox traffic down to the planet. So once you're down there, you can't get back in touch with your ships, so no one really knows what's going on. Their enemy here on Murder is a species of Xenos aliens called the Mega Arachnid, and they are these massive spider-like creatures with these steel-sheathed arms that are razor sharp that they use like swords. And basically, the assault that was launched was, messed up by the atmospheric storms and thrown everywhere, and all the warriors got lost or killed immediately by these creatures. And now the remains of them, about 30 or 40 of them, are with Saul Tarvitz and this captain, as well as his fellow captain Lucius, who is a great blade master. We'll get to hear more from him, of course. But we see that they're there on the surface trying to survive in this very guerrilla warfare style, being attacked by these crazy spider creatures in forests of 30-40 foot, this thick bamboo, so they can't see anything around them until they're being attacked. It's pretty intense. But basically, so they're stuck there. The Luna Wolves also got the symbol for help, and as they come into the system, they see that the Emperor's Children had launched all of their drop pods and soldiers to the planet. Probably, and they deem it's most likely due to the fact they didn't want to share the glory of saving these Blood Angels with anybody else. This is a really awesome part of the book because there hasn't been a lot of combat or fighting that we see during this time in the books. But I'm sorry, you're going to hear my waste management come by. I don't know why they're coming by today, but they are. Oh well. You can hear it in the background. I apologize. But we get to see true Space Marines' abilities to fight an unknown dangerous foe, as Saul Tarvitz leads this ragtag group of survivors along with this cocky swordsman captain Lucius, as they fight off these spiders that continually attack them over and over and over again. And basically each time they get attacked, more and more of their party dies, and they dwindle down to a smaller and smaller group each time, and Saul's pissed. He's like, this is the worst scenario possible. We're gonna be killed to a man and no one will know where we are. No one's been able to help us. This is awful. But basically they fight their way into a large clearing where they find these big white trees, and these trees hanging in the raft, the branch of these trees, they see the remains of the Blood Angels, some of the Blood Angels, and they go, well, that's probably what happened to them. Here we have a time jump, and we come back to Garviel Loken as he's cleaning out what's left of Xavier Jubal's stuff from the squad room, basically, and he finds a strange coin. It's a very plain silver coin that has a wolf's head on one side, and he's like, this is weird. Astartes don't usually keep stuff like this. So he talks to Nero Vipus, who's the commander at the time, and he says, what is this? And Nero Vipus just says, I've never seen it before, which Loken knows Nero, and so he's like, that's not true. I can tell you're lying. What's going on? And Vipus literally just says, I can't say. And then through a lot of pressure from Loken, he finally says it's a lodge medal. Or, I think it could possibly be a Lodge medal, to which Loken is furious. Because the Lodges were things that some Space Marine legions started, these secretive gatherings of Space Marines that would get together in the bowels of the ship in secret, act very secretly. The Emperor didn't disapprove of them because they promoted secrecy within the legions. But Loken is absolutely furious. He chews Nerovipus out and says that there's going to be repercussions. And as he returns to his quarters, he's quickly met by Horus Aximand, who approaches Loken and basically invites him to come to a lodge meeting with him, to which Loken is absolutely flabbergasted that Horus Aximand would be a part of these lodges, because Horus Aximand, we haven't really talked much about him yet, but he's basically one of the Space Marines that looks the most like Horus, hence his title, Little Horus. He's like a little smaller Horus. But he's someone that loves to read and is a learner and studies tactics and is all about the Imperial truth and being knowledgeable of situations. And so for him, for Loken to see he's part of this like kind of weird secret spiritual gathering, he's like, what are you doing? Like, he's shocked. But yeah, and then we jump back to the surface of Murder, where we find Saul Tarvitz and Lucius. They decide, after fighting off swarms of flying mecha arachnids now, that they need to blow up this tree. So they blow up the tree with all these charges that they have, basically, that they brought to deal with whatever. The tree crashes down, clearing out a big swath of terrain so they can see for miles around, which is super nice. And then the storm above where the tree was becomes clear sky almost immediately. And it allows, and basically it creates somewhere that the other surviving Emperor's children can come and meet up. And sure enough, Lord Commander Eidolon, who is the one that is in charge of this entire mission, finds Tarvitz and Lucius near the base of the tree, you know, and he goes, you blew up this tree, and he ridicules Tarvitz for doing so. He's like, what a waste of these explosives for you just to knock down this tree, mostly because you felt like you wanted to get the dead Blood Angels down. He's like, what a waste of explosives. And this is where we get to see some foreshadowing with Lucius, because Lucius pretty much pipes up and immediately strokes Eidolon's ego and is like, yeah, I told him not to use all the explosives. That's wasteful. To which Saul Tarvitz is kind of like, you gotta be kidding me. And he kind of chews Lucius out after the whole meeting with the command squad, and he's like, why didn't you have my back right there? And Lucius is like, well, I did tell you. And he's like, yeah, but like there's something to be said about being like a brother and not leaving me out in the cold with Eidolon. And Lucius is like, it's not like that, you know. And you kind of see the very distinct differences in character. So the Emperor's children, their legion prides perfection above all else. Whatever you're doing, be the best at it. Perfection. And Lucius is definitely that with his sword mastery. He wants to be the best bladesman in the Legion, and believes he is through cocky arrogance. And basically, he represents much of the Legion that is very much about their personal aggrandizement and growth above anybody else's. Where Saul Tarvitz sees the perfection that he's chasing after in his duties as being a captain and protecting his men and leading his men. And there is a distinct difference, and that is why Lord Commander Eidolon doesn't like Saul Tarvitz very much, because Tarvitz wants commanders more like Lucius, not like Tarvitz. It's at this point that the Emperor's children are attacked in a massive assault. Just huge. A whole bunch of Mecharachnids come out of everywhere. Basically, Saul Tarvitz and Lucius, their squad is now dwindled down to about 6 men. They lead an assault because they see the alien creatures have brought out like worker forms and are building the tree again. And he's like, nuh-uh, we're not going to do that. And so he leads them and they attack them, but basically get knocked down and the worker forms cover them in cement and they get stuck in the base of the tree, unable to like get out. And that's when basically they hear the sound of drop pods and a white gauntlet with black trimming reaches down and lifts Tarvitz out of the goop, and it is Tarek Torgadon there to save them. Now, we'll flash back a little bit to before Tarek launches his assault, and we see the Luna Wolves speaking with the commanders of the Blood Angel ship and the Emperor's Children ship, and they're just horrified to find out that 3 Blood Angel companies went down to the surface and they've not been heard from. And they're even more horrified to find out that the Emperor's Children pretty much did the exact same thing, and they're just shocked. But they plan that they'll do the assault, and they and they get a day to basically prepare themselves for the assault and rescue mission of the Emperor's Children and the Blood Angels. During this night, Loken ends up going to the lodge meeting with Horus Aximand, and it's all super secretive. Horus wears a hood. They all wear hoods. He comes to this, goes into the bowels of the ship, and they find these lodge rooms, and to get in, they have to say a secret password and show their coin. And when he comes in, Loken is immediately just like, this is super wrong, and doesn't like it, doesn't vibe with it. But basically, at first, he's very much like, I hate these. These are not what I want to be a part of. But when all the brothers take their hoods off, he realizes that most of the men in this lodge are those that he respects and are his close friends. And they basically convince him that lodges aren't about secrecy or anything like that, but it's about brotherhood, a place where no matter what your rank is, you can come together and be able to speak your mind freely without repercussion. And in the end, Loken almost to a degree seems to feel like these necessarily aren't so bad, and very much when Nerovipus asks him if he's going to come back again, he says, I can't say, which is the deal. That's the password to get into these lodges and what you're supposed to say if anybody asks about them. So it seems that Loken is now on board with the lodges. At least that's what it seems. We see then from that point onward, it jumps us back down to the assault and Tarek saving Saul and Lucius, and then the remainder, and he commends them for their bravery. He's like, 6 of you attacked this position? You're crazy. But yeah, and then we see Eidolon then comes over to where Saul, Tarbitz, Lucius, and Tarek Turgadon are speaking, and just right off the bat decides to be the biggest douchebag around, and he's like, I am Eidolon, he says, facing Turgadon, and Turgadon's like, I'm Turgadon, and Eidolon is like, under the circumstances, I'll understand if you don't bow. And Tarek responds, I can't for the life of me imagine any circumstance in which I would. Which leads to a very confrontational moment between Tarek Turgadon and the Lord Commander, who greatly outranks this captain, but due to Tarek's unofficial status as Mournival, and the fact that he just saved all the Emperor's Children's butts, that Eidolon kind of keeps his cool. Is furious, of course, but keeps his cool. But Tarek just rips into him, and it's like, you are an idiot. Not only were 3 Blood Angels companies lost, but all of these Emperor's Children companies were lost. What were you doing? And it's just absolutely ridiculous. But Loken and Horus are able to kind of talk down Tarek's anger, but it's still, he hates Eidolon. Tarek hates Eidolon. And he should. Eidolon was a fool. He deployed his legion without knowing what was below, and didn't reconnaissance anything. So yeah, absolutely crazy. But through this time, we get to see Tarek and Tarvitz talk a lot, and then we get to see a bond between the two of them, Tarek and Saul Tarvitz. Which is cool, because the two of them are very alike in a lot of ways. Saul Tarvitz is a little lighter of a character than, say, Loken or some other characters that'll be introduced. But yeah, and then this is back on the ship while Tarek is saving the Emperor's Children. We get to see a conversation between Loken and then the Ancient of the Legion, Captain Yekaton Cruz. Yekaton Cruz is a Terran-born Luna Wolf, one of the few left that joined the Legion in the very beginning of the Crusade. And he's known as the Half-Herd because no one really listens to him, because all he does is ramble about what the Luna Wolves aren't doing right, what's going on, all that stuff like that. So a lot of people don't like Cruz. Loken does not doesn't ignore him and listens to him. And it's a very interesting conversation because Yekaton Cruz really gets to talk about where he feels like the Legion is losing itself with the lodges and with all this other stuff. And he makes Loken kind of think about the what has transpired over the last couple months since him becoming part of the Mournival. And he goes to find Euphrates Keeler, and basically after reading, he goes back and he reads this book that Kirill Sinderman gives him, and in the book, it's a history book of Terra, kind of. It's a little fanciful, and he'll admit it himself, but as he's reading it, he sees that there's a similar experience that happens to the soldiers of this old army that are attacking this Terran city, where they turn upon themselves in like demonic form. And so it reminds him of Euphrates Keeler, so he goes to find her. So he goes and talks to one of the other remembrancers, and he basically sends him down to where it's not Carcassy. He talks to Ignatius Carcassy. That's the other remembrancer. Sorry about that. And he sends him down, and they go down into the bowels of the ship to find Euphrates Keeler. And Carcassy knows where she is, but he's been kind of keeping it a secret. And he goes, and there's a soldier that's like guarding the door, like an off-duty soldier, and he won't let Ignis in until Loken looms up behind him, and then the soldier's like, oh shit, it's a Space Marine, and he backs up. So then Loken goes into the room to talk to Euphrates Keeler, who seems to be very at peace with everything that happened. She explained that right after it happened, she couldn't sleep, she was terrified, super scared, but she eventually found peace with her community. And Loken's kind of like, what does that mean? And she shows him a copy of the Lectitio Divinitatis, which is the cult of the Emperor, basically. So this is in its earliest form, the Church of the Emperor, where which started in the bowels of the ship, among crews and serfs, with people that worship the Emperor as a god. And she says that it's given her the ability to just like be able to get over that. Loken doesn't approve, but it doesn't really seem like to be that big enough of an issue for him to push, especially after she survives such a terrible experience, so he leaves her be. But he does get to see picked images that she took of Jubal, and he does kind of get to see that there's Jubal, but there's also the outline of something like inside of his body too. So he can see that there's something more at work than what he has been told or what he believes. It's at this point that the Blood Angels fleet underneath Sanguinius expedition fleet show up and join with the Luna Wolves. And Sanguinius is heartbroken to learn of the 3 companies that were destroyed and all of his sons that die. And he basically then joins with Horus, and together they wage a 6-month war upon the Mecha Arachnid, and basically like completely almost wipe them out. It's a brutal war though, because this is, in my opinion, the Mecha Arachnid remind me a lot of the Tyranids in a way. They don't devour and consume biomass, but they also they're like a horde of insectoids that are very hard to deal with due to 4 sharp limbs that attack, and it's very interesting. But and one night at the camp after a brutal battle, Sanguinius talks to Horus, and they talk about his election to War Master and what that means. And Sanguinius is surprised that Horus hasn't changed the name of his legion or the colors of his legion to fit his title and position better. And Horus is like, it doesn't need to happen. Luna Wolves works just fine. I don't really see a point of doing this. And then Sanguinius is like, well, the other Primarchs would have if they'd been given the chance, like the Emperor gave to you. And so he does agree, and him and Sanguinius talk about it, and Horus settles upon changing the Legion name to the Sons of Horus. And the color is like a dark green, still trimmed with black. So from white to dark green, and no longer the Luna Wolves, they will be called the Sons of Horus when that time comes. And they continue to wage war upon the planet of murder. The book comes to an end with a large armada approaching the armadas of the War Master and Sanguinius combined. And the book ends with basically them receiving a Vox message in Terran, so the language they speak, from humans that they've never seen before, that basically are like, didn't you read the warning signs? Why are you doing this to this planet? And that's where Horus Rising ends. So basically, I'm going to go a little bit over an hour today, and I apologize, guys. But this book has got a lot to unpack. So my thoughts on Horus Rising. I think the biggest takeaways from Horus Rising are the fact that Dan Abnett did a fantastic job bringing out the humanity in Adeptus Astartes and bringing it to the front and the forefront of the books, because like I said, if you've read any sort of codexes or 40k lore, Space Marines are weapons and tools of the Imperium of mankind, keeping humans at bay with their life and sacrifice, or keeping the enemies of humans at bay with their life and sacrifice. Not humans, but they do keep humans at bay too, because humans find them unapproachable and terrifying. Whereas in Horus Rising, we actually see Space Marines as human characters with empathy, that can tell jokes, that do all this stuff, and it's kind of a shock, but Dan Abnett does a really good job showing that. It also brings up the ties of brotherhood of these legions immensely. Like any military in modern day, there is a sort of brotherhood that comes when you take arms together for a common cause, and that is what these legions are. They are a group of brothers. Now, of course, there is problems within that, just like there would be within a family. You have multiple people throughout the book that aren't super important to the story, so I didn't really bring those instances up. But there's issues Loken has with them and stuff like that. We also see the kind of tension between Saul Tarvitz and Lucius, as well as Eidolon being an absolute prick, and Tarvitz having to put him in his place. But other than that, we also see a lot of really beautiful examples of brotherhood, of basically, this bond that is formed between these soldiers, and as well as between the soldiers and people. I mean, like the Remembrancers, they respect Loken. He is someone that they look up to and respect. Same with like the true friendship between Loken and Tarek Torgadon. And then like the friendship that we see between Tarek Torgadon and the ambitious and kind of hard to read Ezekiel Abaddon, the knowledge-driven tactician Horus Aximand in him, which normally you wouldn't really see these individuals if you look at them like they were in real life. These sort of personalities would kind of clash together, but this bond of loyalty and brotherhood within the Legion really makes a beautiful thing. And Tarek Torgadon, like I said, is an amazing character. So is Garviel Loken, so is Ezekiel Abaddon, so is Horus Aximand. As you read through this, you really begin to really love all four characters. And the other really big takeaway from this book is we get to see like truly how noble, charismatic, and just like post-human Horus Lupercal is. Like, we get to see why he is a Primarch, why he was chosen to be War Master, like how his sons owe this extreme fealty to him as their gene father, but also like he deserves it. Horus is truly a force to be reckoned with. But when we say that, we also get slight little ambitions into the flaw that would ultimately be his downfall, which is his ambition. Horus is incredibly ambitious. The same kind of red flags that pop up whenever Ezekiel Abaddon talks with Loken or anyone else, and you see that raw ambition in Ezekiel Abaddon, that is more masked in Horus, but we also see that greatly within him at slight moments. And it's like I said, like if you're anyone that knows anything about people, or you're anyone that really enjoys reading like psychology books and stuff, there are red flags that pop up when it comes to seeing Horus and hearing him talk and how he uses his charismaticness. You're like, oh my gosh, his charisma. I don't think charismaticness is a word, but it's incredible seeing all of that. So I hope that this gave you a really good understanding of what Horus Rising, the first book of the Horus Heresy, written by Dan Abnett, is about, and that you're able to take this and have understanding. Now, obviously, this book by itself is a little boring compared to like maybe some of the other stuff you've read, but as we go, things are going to start falling into place. And yeah, this will be posted on my YouTube, which is under PNW Warlords. It's also will be, of course, posted here on Spotify. I really appreciate all the support that is given. There's a lot of other links on our YouTube for different groups and people we support, so please take a look at that. If you're someone who plays Warhammer 40k actively, we do battle reports every week as a community with the team I'm a part of. Also, we'd love to follow and support on YouTube and Twitch there as well. But thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. And next week we will talk about False Gods, the second book of the Horus Heresy.